This is Humans of Non-League, a podcast about the people who live and love football outside the spotlight. My name is Chris Nee, and this week's human is a third-generation volunteer at one of London's best-loved football clubs. ANDRZEJ Perkins is the long-serving communications manager at Walthamstow, a role that encompasses the matchday programme, working with media, overseeing photography, and looking after the club website. And, as we're about to discover, that barely scrapes the surface. ANDRZEJ, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much for joining. I've wanted to talk to you for the longest time for reasons that we'll get onto. But anyone who's arrived here from social media will have seen your name, which seems the perfect place to start. Is it right to assume that it tells us something about your background?
So I was born in Walthamstow in East London. That's where my dad was born, but my mum came from France, so I've got a bit of a French background as well. But yeah, just lived around East London all my life, really. Just moved around Leytonstone, once did. I'm now in Woodford, so I'm moving ever so slightly eastwards out to Essex. But no matter who asks, I still say we're in East London, just about.
We've got a bit of a commute to the football nowadays, then.
Yeah, it's not too far. I can walk it to pick up the car on a Sunday morning. So.
I lived in Walthamstow for a little while, about 15 years ago, and it felt then as if it was undergoing the beginnings of some quite significant social change. Has all that come to fruition now?
I think it has. I think it seems to have come around full circle. I think even before I was born, so part of what I do now, I look at the old programmes and old newspaper articles, and in the 1950s we were getting 100,000 when we played at Wembley. But then it decreased, and towards the late 80s, early 90s, we were getting attendances of 200 or 300 some weeks. As the demographics of the area changed, just a lot of people moved out, so we saw our attendances go right down. While there's clubs further out into Essex and East Anglia, they're the areas we know that their attendances have gone really up. But as you say, Walthamstow has changed a lot, and especially over the last 2, 3, 4 years, our attendances have skyrocketed. I think there's a lot more people with a bit more disposable income, maybe, or people who aren't originally from London but who have got an interest in football and we're their local team, so they've come to start supporting us.
Did you play football as a kid?
Very, very badly. I think I played for my primary school in goal, and then I think only because I was about a foot taller than everyone else. But after that, no, it went downhill very quickly. I was never the most gifted footballer, but I always loved football. I played as much as I could. I was always watching it on telly, but sadly, it never made me any better.
Did you support a professional club at any point in your childhood?
I still do say I support Arsenal, but I think, having said that, I've never went to Highbury, been to the Emirates once. So it's a bit of a long distance support. I've got very few memories of supporting Arsenal, and I've got quite a few of supporting Walthamstow. I can remember the 98 FA Cup final. That's my earliest Arsenal memory. But I think a lot of it was, when you're a kid at school and people ask who you support, it doesn't always go down well saying you support a non-league team. So I had to have a professional team there to keep a bit of credibility.
It takes some explanation sometimes, doesn't it? I can't get through the name of my team without people feeling sorry for me supporting Coventry City. I don't support Coventry City. You just didn't let me finish. Arsenal's an interesting shout because, as I said, I lived locally for a time. Who would you say the people of Walthamstow support, by and large?
I've never really thought. I think that at our ground we've got a load of five-a-side pitches, and the kids there they're wearing all sorts of shirts. There's Man United, Chelsea, Arsenal. And there's a lot of Barcelona, Real Madrid, but I wouldn't have said that there's only one team in Walthamstow, even though Spurs, Tottenham, West Ham are all really close to us. There's not one that stands out, I don't think.
The Perkins connection with Walthamstow, the football club, in its various guises, goes back all the way to your granddad, who was on the committee?
Yeah, started off with my granddad. I'm not too sure how involved he was, but as growing up I've heard stories of him, and he was a very mild-mannered man. Apparently he died before I was old enough to know him well, but I think someone told me a story once that he chucked a bucket of ice over a referee or something. But he never, ever raised his voice or anything like that. But just one day, it got to him. And I think it's the same with my dad. So he's, and me as well, we're very mild-mannered. But the only time I ever saw him shout as a kid was at referees and at players on a Saturday. So he followed in my granddad's footsteps, and he was secretary, I think, from the late 80s, and he's been doing that since then, and he's been chairman as well. And I think, I didn't really have much chance. I think I was always going to be involved. My little brother managed to get away with it. He comes about once a season. I don't know how he managed that.
What's he doing with his time?
I know, right? He went to watch Leighton Orient for a bit, but that was it.
So you must have been knocking around the place a lot more than the average young supporter. You were part of the furniture before you were 5 years old, surely.
My mum was happy to get me out of the house, probably, but apparently I saw my first game when I was, still a kid, still a baby, just a few months old. And I think I can remember being like really like 5, 6, 7. I can remember being at the ground, but I can't remember any games or anything like that. It probably took till I was about 10 or 11 until I really started going most weeks. And I didn't think it at the time, but I think it was in 2001 or 2 in the FA Vars. We played Mildenhall, I think it was. He beat us after extra time. Our keeper went off injured, and I can remember being disappointed. I remember thinking we're going to win the FA Vars. We've won 2. I think it was about the second or third round or something. But I think we won about 6-1 in the last round. I thought, this is it. Everyone's our level. We can win this thing. And we were nowhere near as good as any of these other teams. But looking back now, I can see that was the first disappointment, the first time I realised that it actually meant something. So since then, about 10 or 11, I've been going almost every week. It's quite some game. I've seen, must be hundreds, if not thousands of games.
Given your various responsibilities around the place, do you prefer away games?
Yeah, I think so. It's when it was a lot quieter, when we were only getting attendances of about 40 or 50, the home games are pretty straightforward. But now that we're getting 250, 300, it is very busy. So I'll get there, 12:30, and I'm on the turnstiles and helping with team sheets, pumping up footballs, sometimes getting the kit, taking that to the laundrette, somehow taking photos at the same time, running the club shop bit on the side. And
do you ever get pulled into secretary jobs as well? Sounds like the kind of thing that might be on your plate eventually.
Yeah, when Dad goes on holiday, he seems to time a lot of his holidays right in the middle of the season at the moment. So I get roped into some of those. But it's rewarding now that we're winning. Not that it wasn't when we weren't doing so well, but when a club's struggling, it becomes a bit of a chore. But you think, we've been going for 150 years. This can't stop because we're getting a bit bored or we're getting tired of losing. We can see how these things go in cycles, that you'll be rubbish for 5, 10, 50 years, and then things pick up again. And it's those times when it picks up that I think makes it all worthwhile. This is our current period now, is the first time that in my memory that we're having sustained success. But I know people in the past have lived through the glory days, and that's why they keep coming. We've got supporters who travel up from Hampshire and all over the country. Some of them are quite old now, but they still manage to come every week. And I think it's partly they do it out of they feel it's a duty, but they've got all those memories behind them that thinks, well, I'm gonna keep doing this until I die.
We as volunteers at clubs, I do some similar roles to you, not all of them by any means, but some of them. It's not so much about the result necessarily as the fact that we have this custodianship role, which is, without wanting to toot our own horn too much as volunteers, without the people like us, the clubs are going to struggle. And there are people who really care very deeply about those clubs and a lot of history behind them. I definitely want to talk to you about Walthamstow's history. But firstly, I want to dip into your experience at the club a little bit more. If I pushed you for a first memory or few memories of being around the club, what would you pick out? Because you're way too early to remember the initial first phase.
Yeah. So we switched grounds in 1995. We we were Leighton, we merged with Walthamstow Pennant to become Leighton Pennant. And I can remember being at the first game there, so I'd have been 6 or 7, and never watching the actual game. I was, as a kid, you find someone's got a football and you find some other kids and you have a kick around. That's probably my earliest memory. And there's little bits here and there, so there's one I remember being up in the clubhouse and we had this weird scratch card machine, and one of our players gave me one of the scratch cards, and it's things like that stick in the mind, that have nothing to do with the football, nothing to do with the game.
What does it mean to you to have the club as such a big part of your family?
It means I get to see my dad every week. It's one of the things that keeps us quite close together, because we're not great talkers, the men in our family. And I think a lot of families are like that. On the male side, you never talk about your feelings or anything like that, but you see each other. You have that common thread in the football that no matter what is happening, that always brings you back together. And to have that every week, it's something that we both really look forward to, and it keeps us close together.
The club's history goes back as far as the 1860s, but it's not a straight line, is it? Why don't you give us a bit of a potted history of Walthamstow and how it came to be?
There's the actual books written on the subject, I think. But I think as you say, from the 1860s, the club started and folded and, went through about 3 or 4 different entities. But throughout all those, there was a common thread of people, I think, which is why we claim our history going back to that time. So we got through to the 1950s, 1960s. We were playing in FA Amateur Cup finals. So I think they were the real heydays. We were playing at Wembley. And then towards the 70s, 80s and 90s, we really struggled. I think someone older than me will be able to explain it better, but it's the same story. The crowds go down, the level of playing goes down, and it's just a cycle. So it got to the point where 1995 we merged with Walthamstow Pennant to become Leighton Pennant, in the hope that 2 fairly well-established East London clubs coming together would be able to sustain us for a bit longer. I think a lot of it was to do with just keeping the club going, and it worked for 20 odd years, I think, to about 2015, when every 3 or 4 years we had a crisis where a chairman would leave and we were scrabbling around for money, but there was always someone there to chuck an extra couple of grand to keep the club going. I think, as we said, a club at our level can mean so much to people that they feel it's a duty, and that they have that love for the club, that they will chuck a bit of money. And apparently there was one man who remortgaged his house without telling his wife to keep us going at one point. And so there's been periods of real struggle. And in 2017, I think by this time we were Waltham Forest, and our chairman sadly died, and it really looked like it was going to be the end, because we wanted to, as volunteers, we wanted to keep the club going, but we haven't got the sort of money to keep a non-league team going. And there's the option of playing, going right down to park football, but is it the same for a club that was once playing at Wembley to now be playing in parks? Would you carry that on? But we were lucky a few years ago to find another new owner it was his idea to change the name to Walthamstow, and that's really turned things around, because as Waltham Forest, the thinking behind that name change, I think it's probably our 8th or 9th name change in our history, was that Waltham Forest is such a big area. If we change our name to that, we've got that bigger catchment. But in reality, it was the opposite, because no one really, if you ask people where they live, no one says, I live in the borough of Waltham Forest. They say, I live in Leighton or Walthamstow or wherever it is. So by changing the name to Walthamstow, we got that, the local, we're representing this part of London. It happens to be a part where people are interested in doing things locally now and supporting local businesses, supporting local teams. So it's the last 2 or 3 years has really been beyond our imagination, beyond our dreams. Not only the crowds we're getting, but the attention we're getting from the media, and it's people who've heard of us. there's been a couple of times in the last couple of years I've just been speaking to a friend of a friend in the pub, and they'll have heard of the Walthamstow Football Club, and you think, bloody hell, that's something good must be happening. We must be doing something right if we can get our name out and get more people involved.
It seems evident that the club is growing as Walthamstow is changing, and as the name change, as I can confirm as a former resident of the area. Waltham Forest was something that maybe slightly subconsciously put me off finding out what it was all about. I was following a Premier League team away in London in those years anyway, but I was tempted by trying out some more local football, and the closest I ever got when I was just following Villa around was Leyton Orient. And actually, probably, if it had been called Walthamstow at the time I was living in Walthamstow, I probably would have given it a go. So it seems like a very logical change, but it's obviously a very powerful thing as well. But things are changing even more in the last 12 months than ever before, probably in the club's history. How's the last year been for the club, with doors closed, games happening, not happening?
It's been strange. There's been a lot of not knowing whether we're coming or going. The figures at the end of last season, we were second in the league. We had games in hand on the top team. We were fighting for promotion, and for that, if it went to points per game, we'd have got promoted, we think. So for that to be cut so short was a bit of a kick in the teeth. You could go in and cry on for ages about the decision behind it and what the FA should have done and what they shouldn't have done, but that's where we are, and the same thing's happened again now. We've started really well this season. Again, points per game puts us second in the league, but it looks like this season might not finish just like the last one didn't. But having said that, we've got to take the positives, and I've mentioned it before, but our attendances it's just been incredible to see so many new faces, but then the same faces come back week after week. People bringing their kids and saying what a great time they're having. It helps that we're winning, but I think as volunteers, what we try to do is just make it as welcoming and as easy for people to have a good time as possible. It's been quite a roller coaster for the last year.
And at the opposite end of the spectrum, tell me a little bit about the best Walthamstow team you've ever seen.
I think the one we've got at the moment would be up there.
That's pretty good news.
But yeah, it's I think for me, about 2006-07 was one of the ones I remember the most. We'd just gone through a period of having a chairman who was putting a lot of money into the club, and we were signing like real non-league names, people who'd been around the block. And I was too young to know what they were being paid at the time, but it was definitely too much for the way they were playing. There was a lot of them coming towards the end of their career, and you could see that they were just coming to pick up their wages. And now, when I do some of the program stuff, I look back at some of the players there, and they're there the entire season, but only playing a few games and coming back from injury and getting injured again. And I think, yeah, we all know what you're up to here. So, 2006, we had another new chairman, and he brought in a manager, and all the players were really local. So they were Leyton, Leytonstone, Chingford, Walthamstow. There was a piece in the paper saying they were all from 2 mile radius of the ground, and they weren't the best team, but you could see they had that team spirit, they had that togetherness. A lot of them had gone to school together, and they were just so hard to beat. The chairman, who sadly he's also died, he always said, you start with a point, and they were so defensive, and we just nick a goal on the break, we nick a 2-0 here or there, but they were so, it was such a well-structured team, and it was the same 11 every week. We finished just outside the playoffs because we lost the first 4 games. I think that was probably the best team I can remember, except for the way we're playing now.
Watching from afar, it seems that the team that's being built at the moment, you've been able to bring some old names back into the club. Is that a function of the fact that you've been getting more through the gate and you're able to kind of reclaim some players who might have gone elsewhere?
I think there's that, yeah. There's the getting people through the gate definitely helps, but I think a lot of what we're doing, and we want to treat players well and look after them, not always in a financial sense, just making sure that if they need a bit of help, we can help them. I think a lot of that is treating them well, and people enjoying the support of the club. They're more inclined to come back even if it does mean dropping down a level or two or taking a bit of a pay cut. You can see the players enjoy playing at Walthamstow at the moment because of the crowd, because of it is a local club to a lot of them, and we like to look after them, I think.
There must be players that you've known since you were in short trousers.
I think we've got one, Michael Tono. I can remember him. He played for us about 2000, and he played for us about 2008. So that's 13 years ago. It's probably showing how old he is rather than me.
Yeah.
It's funny, especially in East London. You could just, the names go round and round. So you'll look at, on Twitter before the game, you could see all the other teams' team sheets. You think he played for us. He played for us. He was with us as a kid, and it's just the same names. They just move around between clubs.
Nice to keep it local.
Yeah.
What is it that you think that you and me and everybody else loves about non-league football?
I think having never properly been to Premiership football, I've been to the odd game here or there, but it's just at non-league it's so close to the action. It's so much more laid back. You could turn up if you want to, like 5 minutes before kick-off. You can bring a beer into the ground. On a personal level, you feel more connected to the players. There's been some in the past that I've worked with while they're playing for the team, so you think, okay, you're not that different from me. You're a hell of a lot better footballer than I am, but we lead quite similar lives, and I think that's what people enjoy that. And then there's the camaraderie in the crowd and getting to know people over the course of a season or the course of a few seasons. You make really good friendships, and it's funny seeing the different groups of supporters behind the goal, and then they start mingling, and then after a year a lot more people know each other, and it's just a real laugh in the league. It's the quality of football is a lot better than people expect, I think, but I think there's so much that goes on that makes us pull out our hair sometimes, but it's why we love non-league. Like, we had a game probably a couple of months ago where we turned up and there was no pitch markings on the pitch, and at the time you're a bit pissed off, and then some bloke comes out with a spray can and he starts doing the line, and then he realises there's none left, and I think someone went to B&Q to buy some paint at one point, and we're there thinking we just want to get this game played. It was freezing as well.
I remember this. This is a relatively local game, isn't it, where there was more to the situation than met the eye?
Yeah, yes, that's right. But at the time you think, Jesus Christ, what is going on? But you look back, it's just such a laugh, and you wouldn't get that in the Premier League. We've had teams turn up in the same colour kit as us, and because it doesn't matter as much, as there's not millions of pounds riding on it, is no one's that involved that they're going to get really angry about it. You take it on the chin a bit and you have a laugh about it. Especially the players as well. They're there, most of them. They're at their level, but they want to have a laugh playing it. It just seems everyone's there with a positive attitude, and they're there for the right reasons because they want to watch some football and have a good time, really.
I always think football clubs have their own identities, each one different from the next. What is the character of Walthamstow as a football club?
If you asked me a couple of years ago, it would have just been shit. It's I don't know. I think we've always tried to play football, and when you haven't got the players to do that in our league, it can be very difficult, especially stereotyping here, but when we go out to play in Essex and everyone's 6'3" and above, and we're trying to play football, and so many times in my time watching the club, we've just seen us get kicked off the park by people who are bigger than us and not necessarily better footballers, but they knew what you had to do to play non-league and what you had to do to win. So we've had teams probably 5 or 6 years ago. I can remember we were all watching them pre-season. We've got AstroTurf training. These lads are good. They were all Tottenham scholarship dropouts, or they had something to do with Spurs anyway. Yeah, these lads, they're only 19, 20, but they're really not bad. And then as soon as we went out, I think we played Southend Manor on the first day of the season. So going out into Essex, they just got kicked off the park. A lot of the time at our level, you can't play football. I think now we've got the right balance. We've got the old experienced heads who know what non-league football is about, but they know how to this one's in there who know how to play a bit as well. So we've got that balance now.
There's definitely a place for big diags into the corners, isn't there? And it works quite a lot at most of our sort of levels. Is it a difficult place for referees to come?
I wouldn't say difficult. I mean, no one's ever on the referee's back. There's never, even as our crowds have gone up, there's never been abuse at the referee. There's been shouting at the referee. You get that most places, but it's good-natured and it seems to be done with humour. But having said that, there has been a lot of decisions that have gone our way that shouldn't have. I think because a couple of years ago we needed a win to stay up on the last day of the season, and we got a penalty in the first half, and it just wasn't a penalty. It was a massive dive. The fellow got up and was just laughing with the supporters. You can see how easily they get swayed, and for years it was us going to places with bigger crowds and we were on the receiving end of it, but it seems to have turned around a bit now. It is funny. There's so many times you're just looking at each other laughing, thinking, how's that gone our way?
If I'm not mistaken, Walthamstow is one of the clubs that has a self-appointed supporters section. The Rabble?
Yes,
there we go. I knew it was in there somewhere.
It's the Rabble, yeah.
What are they like?
They're a great bunch. I think it was one or two of them started coming as a lot of people do. They just watch from a safe distance. And speaking to them, they said, right, we're going to get, this is when we were facing this relegation battle about 2 or 3 years ago. They think, right, we're going to get stuck in, we're going to have a few beers, we're going to have a bit of a sing. And it kind of snowballed from there. I'll have to dig it up. There's a picture of one of a game where I think we were 4-1 down with about 3 minutes to go and we drew 4 all.
Wow.
And there's only, I think it's 8 or 9 of us there, but ended up falling over the barrier but causing a bit of a scene. It's amazing how just getting 3 or 4 people and they bring a mate and then their mate brings a mate and it really snowballs to the point where, the supporters are now known as the Rabble, and it's a really good thing to have, and their support is always really behind the team, good-natured, just there to have a laugh and not taking themselves too seriously.
Friendly with opposition goalkeepers, I imagine.
Yeah, the funny thing is, now that there's a few people behind the goal, everyone's having a bit of a nibble with the goalkeepers, and you can see the ones where it gets to them, where they're like, no, I'm not going to reply, I'm not going to get involved. And it gets worse and worse as the game goes on. But the ones who know a bit more about what's going on, who'll turn around and have a laugh with them, the goalkeepers won straight away.
You're now the club's communications manager, which we'll definitely come on to shortly, but I understand you've done more or less everything. You've listed a few of them already, but turnstile, youth coaching.
Yeah, I managed the under-18s for a season.
How was that?
It was difficult. That we had the players were good enough, but we lost our goalkeeper to the reserve team the day before the season started, and we weren't able to find a new one, basically. So we picked up results, but I was only 18 at the time as well. So I was playing in goal, trying to manage a team as well. It was a challenge. We did okay in the league, but then I went off to uni and I thought, no, I can't be doing this. I've got to take a bit of a step back. But I've done that. I've been physio every now and then.
Right.
I've done videos, programs, pretty much everything you can think of. Washing the kit, but I'm not allowed to do that anymore. I got told off by my girlfriend for letting it all dry in the house, so I have to take it to the laundry. In fairness, it did smell quite bad.
I bet it did. Where did you go at university?
Leicester.
Did you watch any football while you were there?
I did. I was watching OB Town. So
okay.
They're step 5, same level as Walthamstow. And I think it must have some sort of curse because while I was up there, they were absolutely awful. And then as soon as I left, someone started chucking a load of money at them. And I think they lost about 2 games in 2 years.
You keep an eye on them now?
Yeah, I think they're struggling again at the moment. I'm not too sure what's going on up there. But it's I do always keep an eye out for the result. I've been up to see them a couple of times since I left uni. I think one game they were 2-1 down with a minute to go, and people texted me saying, "Come on, we're in the pub, come and meet us." So I left, and they won 3-2, and I missed the 2 goals. Obviously,
always happens to us a few times in our lifetime. That does.
Yeah.
Back to Walthamstow. You're going to be chairman someday, aren't you?
If I win the lottery, I'll do it.
Is that part of the prerequisite of being the chairman now? Because, the clubs I've been around, it was a nominated representative really because the clubs weren't really money-making operations anyway. Is it somebody who needs to be really in charge of the purse strings now?
I think it depends. If you ask my dad, who's chairman now, it's hard to get a pint out of him at the bar. So he's definitely not pulling the purse strings. But I think it's a job for someone who's got a bit more time on their hands than me. Yeah, when I'm retired, I think I won't have any choice. Then I'll have to end up doing it.
Now, if you're listening to this and you haven't been aware of Andre before, something you need to know about him is that Walthamstow's programme is arguably the best anywhere in non-league. What are you aiming for when you pull one of those beauties together?
I don't know. I think I do graphic design and communications and everything for a living. But I taught myself through doing the Walthamstow programme. So I think I did my first one in 2005. Oh. So that's 16 years of 30 programmes a season. So it has been tough, but we've gone through ups and downs. And a couple of seasons ago, I was probably about 5-6 years ago, I was putting together 2 or 3 pages just to meet the minimum requirement. And I thought, do you know what? We're rubbish on the pitch. At least we can do something right, something that I actually have control over. I could put a decent program together. I know how to do it. So it's gone on from there. So upped it to 20 pages to 28, and I think we're now at about 40 pages this season. I think it's not an ego boost, but hearing people say nice things about it makes it worthwhile. And we have groundhoppers come along every now and then and say, I'm here just because of your program. When people say that, I think that's really, well, it's really good of them to say it, but it's really appreciated because it shows we're doing something right, and it shows that all those hours put into it aren't to waste. I'm lucky I've got a few contributors who are very good as well, so it's not all me writing it anymore. But it's something that I'm very proud of, and I think the club are very proud of as well.
Are those reliable contributors? Where do you get 40 pages of content from?
I think I do a lot during the off season. I think during the last lockdown, I wrote a lot just to have, and then I was just almost about to run out, and then we've gone into this lockdown again. But they're very, every week they'll come up with something. They've all got their own little sections. So we have one person who looks at one of our classic programs from over the years, and we've got the beer hunter who looks at our next away games and sees what pubs are worth going to near the ground, and just things like that I think make our program a bit unique. I never want to look at other people's programs in non-league and say that's rubbish, or why are you feeling with that, because I know how hard it is. And for a lot of people, I'm lucky to have the skills to be able to do a program, but a lot of clubs don't have that person, and it's just one more job for someone to do. So it's never, I don't think, a case of saying our program is better than yours. It's just something that we can take a lot of pride in. I think at the moment it helps that we've got a local printer who sponsors us as well and prints the program for free. I think once I got that sorted, I think, right, that's it. I can really, really crack on now. Because before we printed it at home, so it was trying to keep the pictures small and keep it just black and white to save on toner. But now we've got someone printing it, I can just go hell for leather on it.
Yeah, as the editor of a Step 5 program, can confirm that you need that kind of support locally. It really helps.
That's I think that's the best thing that's happened to the club in about 20 years.
Which is the contributor who is always leaving you with a blank page 5 minutes before a deadline?
I've got to say that they're all really good. Normally they're chasing me. There's been quite a few times where I forgot that we've got a home game coming up, and suddenly I start receiving all these articles by email. Better crack on with that. So they're all really good. I'll dig out our manager, Max Mitchell. He's always the last minute getting his notes across.
Yeah, I tend not to bother with that bit. I learned when I was at Tooting that bit was always going to be the difficult bit. I had some input from a previous manager at my more local club now, but generally I just don't want to put them through it, because I ended up writing them, which is fine as long as you get some input. I don't mind that, but making it up and they just sign it off, that's tough.
Yeah, we've had a few like that, but we're lucky the last few managers have been quite They want to get their point across.
Yeah, that's always good. When I've had at Coventry Sphinx, we had a manager who did want his comments in there, and he was always forthcoming, which was fantastic. But if they don't want to do it, I'm not going to force them to. I'll put something else there. My notes. There we go. I'll have my say. You do a lot of wider communications work at the club as well. What does a typical match weekend look like for you?
I think bringing everything together. So I do the match day tweets, all our social media stuff. So it's getting all the graphics prepared before that. We did consider dabbling in the player celebration gifts, and it was a good idea at the start of the season, but I said to the manager, half of these players who are here now won't be starting your first game, and then the other half won't be here by the end of the season.
It's next to impossible at our level even to get a team photo, isn't it?
Yeah. By the time you've taken it, it's out of date. So we knock that sort of stuff on the head, but we do little graphics. And I'm lucky I've got we've got a lad called Darren who does all the interviews and the match reports, and we've got another lad, Nathan, who does all our videos. So between us three, we've got almost every base covered. So I take some photos, and then depends where we're playing, who we're playing, and then we take about 10 and then have a few beers. And I think I sometimes have to stop myself and take a bit of a step back, because there's so much more we can do, because there's youth teams and reserve teams, and you could go and do interviews with their managers, or you can go and watch one of the youth teams on a Sunday morning, and the temptation's always there, but you have to have a bit of a life as well. So sometimes I have to take a bit of a step back, make sure I can do some other stuff in my time.
Do you get much support from local media?
No. And that's not. I'm not blaming them. We've got one local paper who, in probably the last, I'd say up until about the mid 2000s, they'd send a reporter down to every game and a photographer, but their circulation just isn't big enough to justify that anymore. I think they've got one sports reporter who does all the local papers in the area, and they just cover West Ham and Spurs, and they ignore it now. I don't blame them, because they've got to do what they can do to survive. But what we have seen is more, especially around Walthamstow, is local radio stations, independent publications that are springing up, and they are more interested. It's those that are probably, in fact, landing with the demographic that we're targeting, or the local people. They're a lot more likely to read that than the local Guardian, which is the paper which has been struggling. So while the mainstream press has gone down, it's the local independents have started to support us, which is really good as well.
And what does that entail? Do they just show up and do their thing? Do you have to deal with them on a match day at all?
I kind of leave them to it. I think it's just making that initial connection with them and then letting them crack on. But it's just on that side, the local businesses and arts organisations in the last couple of years have really got involved. So there's a arts group called Wood Street Walls, who are the local to Walthamstow, and I don't think there's a single blank surface in Walthamstow they haven't painted now, but they do just street art basically. But they came down to our ground a few months ago and did a William Morris print all over the back of our stands, because William Morris is from Walthamstow. So it's things like that they're just giving up a bit of their time to support us, but it's making a huge difference. It's so good to see it.
Just to finish off, communications is also your day job. Is it a career that you'd recommend to young people in 2021?
Yeah, I think so. I really enjoy it. So I work for a housing association in the day, and it's varied. So I'll be doing, what I do is like websites one day, magazines another day, a video the day after. So it's really varied, and it keeps me on my toes, and it's something I'm always learning as well. So I find that what I do in a day job sometimes helps me out on the football side of things, and the other way around as well.
What is it that makes you a top-notch graphic design communications professional?
No one's ever said that before. They said, where'd you get him? But I think being able to do a lot of different things to an okay standard that's been useful.
70% and out the door.
Yeah.
Finally, back to the football club. What are Walthamstow's ambitions for the next 3, 4, 5 years?
I think a lot of it is consolidation. we've had chairmen come in, I want to be in the Football League in 10 years, and that's just not us. I never see us as a Football League club, nor do I ever want us to be. But I think the level we're at the moment is probably a division below where we feel we ought to be. We got relegated, where are we now? About 5 or 6 seasons ago, and it's taken us a good few years to recover from that. But I think a promotion or two over the next 4 or 5 years is what we're aiming for. That's on the footballing side. We want to continue to be a part of the community, to keep building on those relationships we've got, keep supporting people, and hope in turn they come and support us.
Well, Andre, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
Where can we find you? Where can we find the club on social media?
We're at Walthamstow FC on just about everything, and I am at Tweet Perkins on Twitter.
If you've enjoyed meeting Andre, you'll like our other episodes too. Don't forget to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Humans of Non-League is a Sphinx Football production. Thank you for listening.